Florida State has officially released its first depth chart of the 2025 football season, and there are a few takeaways here that will be a little bit surprising, some not so much. You've got a preferred walk-on here on the depth chart. You've got a position, a player, a tight end moving to another position, and we've got a handful of other things to take away from this depth chart release. With me this afternoon is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief. D-Lou, we are in game week. I'll be up there in Tallahassee with you. We're looking at Doak Campbell Stadium. Looks like we might get some Garnet end zones as well. I mean, this is really what's bigger, the end zones or the depth chart? I don't really know at this point.
Well, we're gonna have to keep an eye on those cameras and see how the end zones come together. I don't know if they're just trying to do a little bait and switch on us, or if we're actually gonna see a garnet, a white end zone, or something new, something better than green on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, definitely excited to finally have this depth chart here, first one of the 2025 season. Obviously, it's been a little bit different this preseason, this fall camp, not being able to be out there and see these practices and get a feel for everything, and just hearing it from the coaching and the player side of it throughout Florida State's fall camp. But now to actually get your eyes on this two deep and have an idea of who's going to be out there for Florida State against Alabama, I think it's starting to feel a little bit real.
Yeah, no, it is. And going back to the end zones, we did see Michael Alford put out a little hint or maybe a teaser, something like that. That'd be so mean if Alford did that to us. But he did put out a GIF or GIF of a painting of red or garnet going down. And yeah, so far it looks like the Earth Cam that everybody's checking every, what was it, 4 hours? It used to be we would check it for every scrimmage that's going on and seeing what's going on, try to get some kind of sneak peek of what's happening. But is it for every 4 hours there's an update?
I thought it updates every hour.
Yeah, okay. So we will find out pretty soon, though, if they are indeed garnet end zones. But the big news out of today is that depth chart, D-Lou. Let's go ahead and pull it up here on the screen for everybody. To be honest with you, there wasn't a whole ton of crazy surprises in here, but there were some notable things that stood out to us as well. Not a shocker here, D-Lou, that Thomas Castellanos is your starting quarterback, but you do have a mix there, a blend of Brock Glenn and or Kevin Sperry at the backup position. Now we know that Brock Glenn was dealing with an injury throughout the preseason, specifically here in fall camp. Seems like he's been back to a full go in practices, which is really good, but Kevin Sperry has been able to get a lot of burn with him being out.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, Kevin Sperry really has taken the reins and run with it, getting those extra reps throughout the preseason with Brock kind of limited due to that injury. And, you know, it sounded like Florida State got him back, that being Brock last week, finally returning from that injury, getting some practice reps. But I think Kevin Sperry, I mean, he just had more time to gain experience, to build chemistry, to run the offense in these preseason scrimmages with the guys that are going to be out there on the field. So, I mean, if it came down to it, I'd be really interested to see who entered the game in relief of Tommy, whether that be Brock or if they were to roll with a true freshman and Kevin Sperry. But either way, I think it's a good thing for your quarterback room that you've already got Sperry, who early enrolled, trying to push Brock on that depth chart, and it'll be something to follow throughout the season.
Absolutely. Let's run over to the running back position. You've got Roydell Williams or Gavin Sawchuk. As we know, Gavin Sawchuk coming from Oklahoma, but we've heard really good things upon his arrival. D-Lou, you were there for the one little bit that you had of viewing time at practice, and he looked impressive. And we just saw a video of Thomas Castellanos breaking that rock. And in the background there, I know you tweeted that Gavin Sawchuk looked really impressive size-wise. And Roydell looks like he's been hitting the weight room too. But those two guys are going to be a blend there at the running back position, along with Jalen Lucas is in there. And, you know, I know the big question we're getting them here on Facebook asking about, you know, where is Cam Davis, someone that came into Florida State highly regarded on the recruiting scene and, you know, built like a truck coming in, big sized guy, just couldn't find his groove as a true freshman last year. And, you know, he worked on his body this offseason, trimmed up trimmed up a good bit. But they were hoping to maybe see a little bit more of some improvement, some development there from him. And it just doesn't seem to be the case at the moment, at least if you're going off of a depth chart. He surely could show us differently once he gets into a game. But right here is Usman Chroma, D-Lou. Cam Davis is put down, and then here comes Usman, who we've talked very highly of. Everybody on this show, along with 2FSU Twitter, everybody on Facebook knows about this young man that has come in and been extremely, extremely impressive, not only to what we're hearing, but also to this coaching staff and Mike Norvell, David Johnson. They can't say enough about this young man who just arrived in the summer, D-Lou. It's really, really cool to see, but he's up here, and, I think it's no shock to us that we'll see number 32 in the game on Saturday afternoon against Bama.
And I mean, it's just such an experienced running back room. And you look at it, Florida State, 4 guys who have transferred into this running back room were starters at previous schools. So, I mean, there is talent. There is a ton of competition, like we've heard Mike Norvell and Coach Johnson talk about throughout the preseason. I just think during the second half of fall camp or so, I mean, it really seemed like Roydell and Gavin Sawchuk and Chroma began to separate themselves a little bit from the pack. And I mean, we even heard Coach Yak talk about, they're primarily going to rely on 3 guys throughout the course of the season. I think those are your primary guys right now. We thought Mike Norvell would probably roll with the veterans in game 1. That appears to be the case with Roydell and Sawchuk, but Chroma is certainly going to get sprinkled in there and have his opportunities. And then as we know about Lucas, I mean, he's a gadget guy. Like, not only a running back, you can put him in the slot, you can put him out wide, kind of do different things with him to utilize that speed and athleticism that he brings to the table. But I think, in the event of Cam Davis, I don't know if he took enough of his opportunities during fall camp. And, when you have a running back room that, like I said, I mean, just has so much experience, and a guy like Chroma, who is an immense talent, you've got to be out there every day having good practices. And I think Cam Davis, he's just been a little bit inconsistent. And at the same time, I think we have to remember this is a guy who primarily played quarterback throughout his prep career, and he was transitioning to that running back position. Obviously, Florida State, they had some high hopes there, but that learning curve, it just seems like it's been a little bit longer than the Seminoles or Cam Davis expected. But I still think that he's someone with a ton of potential. And I mean, you look at the frame that he brings to the table, and I mean, he does have some true athletic traits. So if he is able to understand and get down the nuances of that running back position, he's going to be a guy to watch, throughout the season if he can get involved, and then certainly as time goes on at Florida State.
It's a loaded room, and like I said earlier, I think it's going to come down to maybe when he gets into some games, he can prove it on the field in front of the staff. But right now, it's just not happening on the practice aspect there. Let's jump over to the wide receiver room before we go into tight end. Let's start off with Deuce Robinson. You've got Gavin Blackwell there in the 2 deep, and then also to Elijah Moore behind him. And then, of course, some really good news here as Mike Norvell told us, to the media, that Squirrel White is going to be fully available and is going to be a starter for the Seminoles. Now, that's, I bring that up because he had been injured in the last week or so, a little bit over that, kind of trying to get back to 100%. He's someone that has been a major flash all throughout the fall camp, specifically in some of those scrimmages. We've talked to Mike Norvell at nighttime after the scrimmage, and he would go deep into how well this young man has been playing for them. He's a guy that is explosive, someone that has been building a lot of chemistry with Thomas Castellanos, and you need that kind of threat on your offense, certainly in the wide receiver room, which I'm sure we'll discuss here, which is thin in some departments, even with a tight end moving over to the wide receiver position, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Squirrel White, full go against Alabama, which is some great news for the Seminoles. You got Mekhi Danzy behind him and BJ Gibson as well. And then you've got a true freshman with Javon Boggs in here. And then who's right behind him? Chase Lofton, a true freshman tight end. D-Lou, I think there's a lot to unpack in this wide receiver room. Let's get started. What's number one to you out of this group?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that Deuce Robinson and Squirrel White, if healthy, were going to lock down starting roles. And outside of that, weren't really quite sure how this competition would work itself out at wide receiver. Obviously you had Blackwell coming in, experienced guy from UNC, like you said. And then behind that, I mean, just some really interesting young pieces in the room that if they are to grow up and assume their talent, I mean, they could be really good for Florida State going into 2025, like Elijah Moore, Mekhi Danzy, and BJ Gibson, who are both playing their respective dual sports. throughout the offseason, but are now back on the football field. But I think the real surprise in this wide receiver room has been Javon Boggs. I mean, ever since arriving at Florida State, he's jumped right into it, and winter workouts and spring practice is a guy that we're hearing a ton about. And I mean, obviously, he brings a pretty high pedigree over to Florida State with what he was able to do during his high school career, setting the state record for receiving yards in a single game, coming up, I think, less than 50 yards short of the state record for receiving yards in a single season. So this guy, and it was at a high level of football. I mean, playing for Cocoa High School, who won 3 consecutive state championships to conclude his prep career. So Javon Boggs, I mean, he's jumped right into the mix, and man, to have a true freshman out there starting in game 1 against Alabama, I think that's something we're all going to have our eyes on.
I was going to say real quick, the last time that probably happened in Mike Norvell's coaching tenure in Tallahassee would be Malik McLean, I do believe. I believe he was the last true freshman starter at the wide receiver position, if I had to think about it now. But, the main thing for him, the way that he got out there on the field, was blocking. I mean, that's what Mike told us. And, we weren't fully expecting for Malik McLean to be a starter in that week 1. But he made himself worth it just because of what he was able to do outside of just trying to catch the ball, run routes. It was more of him in the blocking scheme of things. And if you think about what Gus Malzahn is going to want to do in this offense, absolutely, you're going to want to open up things, not only for, of course, running backs and such, or whatever you're trying to do, or blocking for your wide receivers. And I hate to bring up screens, but if there were to be plays like that, but that's where, Boggs is able to get himself out there onto the field more. And definitely when you have a guy like Thomas Castellanos, who's going to be rolling out a lot, and having some guys block for him can honestly be a game changer with the wheels that Castellanos has and the vision too. Javon Boggs, man, you don't see that much in college football, at least, for a true freshman to come in and definitely start in week 1 against a top tier opponent in Alabama. But he's ready to go. He's someone too, Mike Norvell was telling us today, a lot of true freshmen want to come in and say, I want to start. I want to be a starter. I want to talk. He hasn't really said much. He's just done things and been productive for them. And that's the main reason why Javon Boggs is a starter on this offense. But here, Chase Lofton, someone that since arrival to Tallahassee has been talked very highly of from this offensive coaching staff. And now he's jumped in at a wide receiver position. That one stood out to me immediately, D-Lou. Whenever we first got our look at this depth chart, I was like, whoa, okay, Chase Lofton is over there. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure since his first arrival in the spring, this staff was like, we got to try to find ways to probably get him out on the field more. And it so happens to be once you reach fall camp and go into week 1, he's going to probably get on the field more because now he's at a wide receiver position and not behind maybe Randy Pittman or Amari Williams, which we'll talk about here in just a minute.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily surprised, I guess, to see him listed at one of the wide receiver positions, but to be the primary backup in the slot, I mean, that says a lot about how Lofton has performed throughout the preseason. I mean, this dude's bringing some serious size to the table at wide receiver, 6'6", 220 pounds. I mean, that'll be a fun one to watch out there. And I mean, Florida State, like you said, Logan, I mean, they're just so deep at tight end. They have so many versatile guys. But a guy like Chase Lofton, who, I mean, you can see from what he did during his prep career, he's very advanced as a receiver and as a route runner, is athletic enough to create space out there against defenders. And Florida State wants to be able to utilize that talent. And we've heard Mike Norvell talk about it. I believe tight ends coach Chris Thompson as well, that not only has he been repping at tight end, but they've been working him in the slot since the summer, getting him used to that position, getting him now some more reps during preseason camp. So this is a guy, I mean, a ton of potential, and it's going to be fun to see him out there in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, no, I'm really intrigued to see what he looks like. But yeah, that tight end room, we've talked about it highly throughout the offseason. That is a unit that has really became, if we're going to talk about a top 3 unit on the team, it is in the tight end, which we're going to talk about right now. Randy Pittman, which Mike Norvell gushed about him this morning, but he is your starting tight end going into the game. You've got Amari Williams in here, number 40. And then Landon Thomas, it's kind of an and/or situation here between those two. No Marquiston Douglas in here, But let's start off with Randy Pittman Jr. I mean, that was someone that we know came with Gus Malzahn, versatile all across the board, can
Mm-hmm.
do so many different things for you. Can be a playmaker. Heard a lot of good things also too during those scrimmages with him, moving him around all across this offense. But this staff feels very highly on him, and I also think too, man, they need that guy to stay healthy, because I think not only just for his playmaking ability, but make things a lot easier too for Thomas Castellanos, because I think he's going to be a nice cushion just in case things fall apart. Randy Pittman will be out there and can be someone that is you can rely on, someone that's reliable and good with his hands.
I agree with that. Yeah, he's going to be the leader of this tight end room, especially, like you mentioned, with the experience that he has in this offense from Gus Malzahn. And, Malzahn has used this guy a multitude of ways, not just
Yeah.
tight end, but at the H-back position, which I'm a little bit surprised we didn't see listed on the depth chart. But I mean, either way, just kind of a plug and play guy. And then you've got some athletic freaks behind him, and Amari Williams and Landon Thomas. Thomas recently getting back after an injury. And then, Marquise and Douglas, he's going to be in the mix here as well. Like we said, Chase Lofton could get some reps at tight end. I think the main thing for him is just continuing to build on his body and, being 6'6", 220 pounds. He's a little bit small at tight ends. That's why Florida State's probably going to use him at receiver a little bit more. But I mean, like we've talked about for weeks now, this tight end position probably the deepest on Florida State's entire offense, and I think they're going to try and utilize those top four guys heavily. We're probably a lot of two tight end sets, things like that. Especially, I mean, having Randy Pittman out there, and then you can throw in Amari or Landon Thomas, what they can do as receivers. It should be really fun to see the kind of combinations that Florida State can use.
Really also interested to see how well Amari Williams has developed as a blocker too, because I mean, for him to jump up here, of course, in the depth chart, already know about his playmaking ability, but it would be great to see him grow there at the line, because man, that puts you out there on the field more, and that, like you just said, that opens up a lot of variety of things that you can do in your packages with your tight end packages. Because man, who do you who do you guard? Randy Pittman, you know what he's going to bring to the table, but if Amari Williams can also get on the line, but also too, he shows you how good he is in the pass catching game in the red zone as well. And then, if Landon Thomas can come back fully 100% after his injury, then that's what we've been talking about. This is a loaded tight end room, and Gus Malzahn is lucky to have that going into this season. Let's go in the offensive line, baby. Here we go. This is it's kind of been that way for a couple of years. As FSU fans, you're just like, oh my goodness gracious. Please, 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 just look average. Just average. That's all FSU fans are asking for when they get into Doak Campbell Stadium, and it's not going to be an easy matchup for them going against Alabama's defensive line. But just have something there, man. And let's go through it here. Gunnar Hansen is at your left tackle position. No kind of shocker there. Lucas Simmons is right behind him. At left guard, you've got Richie Leonard or Jacob Rizzi. Jacob Rizzi has had a good camp since coming back from injury. You've got Luke Pettibon over there at the center position, someone I am extremely high on. And then you got Chavez Thompson there behind him. At right guard, you've got Adrian Medley and or Jacob Rizzi there. So he's a guy that can flip over either a left guard or right guard for you, which is great with his versatility. And then you also got Micah Pettis, the Ole Miss transfer, big boy there at right tackle. Adrian Medley is the backup there at right tackle. And then also Jonathan Daniels has earned himself a spot here on this depth chart, which I think means something. They've been pleased with his play, which is a good sign there for you at the tackle position. I don't think they would just put out, Jonathan Daniels on there for having a 3-deep guy. But, what are your thoughts on this here on this depth chart overall for this offensive line, D-Lou?
Pretty much, at least for the starters, pretty much as expected. Obviously, like you said, Rizzi has really worked himself into the conversation for a starting spot after getting back onto the field, right around Florida State's second scrimmage of the preseason. So, he's quickly impressed since getting back to it. Behind that, though, Same Man Thompson, the true freshman, sliding in there as the backup center. Now, I do think, if Florida State was forced to go with another center, it would probably be Rizzi stepping in there. And I think that's probably the case for multiple spots here on the starting five. Both the guard spots, center. Wouldn't surprise me if he would step in at right tackle if Florida State went to their backup tackle. So, I mean, this is just what the depth chart says, but I think Jacob Rizzi, he's Florida State's true sixth man and someone that can step in at multiple spots for Florida State. But regardless, I mean, like you said, Lucas Simmons being on here, John Daniels, Samman Thompson, who, we've heard Herb Hand say some really good things about. It shows at Florida State. I mean, they do have some young pieces in this room that they're so excited about. Andre Otto being there as the backup left guard. And, ideally your starting five is going to stay healthy for the entirety of the season. But if not, I mean, you're going to have to rely on some of these younger pieces. And Herb Hand, I mean, he's willing to throw them into the fire and see what happens.
Yep. Before we jump over to the defense, if you're new here, got over close to 150 you guys here on YouTube with us. We go live at least probably twice a week, definitely mandatory twice a week because we'll have an instant reaction for you guys after the Alabama game, but tons of content coming here on YouTube. So if you're new here or been around, make sure you smack that like button if you enjoy the content also too. If you're new, smack the subscribe button, press that bell next to it, and it will notify you too when we do go live. Appreciate all of y'all joining us this offseason and helping build some growth for us on here. Like I said, show doesn't stop. It's just only beginning, man. Lots of things coming for you guys here on YouTube. All right, let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. Tony White, now Florida State's new defensive coordinator. And, man, he's been on a mission to find guys that are hungry, that will go get after it, listen to their coaching staff. And, I think his message he sent about a week or two ago really kind of will show us here on this depth chart of who he wants to put out there on the field in a week one matchup against this Alabama team. Let's start off with the defensive end room, D-Lou. Let's go over to James Williams. No shocker here. He is one of your starters coming from Nebraska with Tony White. It's going to be really intriguing how he looks out there as a 3-down edge rusher. And then you got Jaden Jones. He's one that, man, oh, man, kind of came out of nowhere. If he's going to be a big surprise to anybody from fall camp, it's Jaden Jones. And this staff has felt very highly on him and two in some of those scrimmages. So he's there right behind James Williams. And then on the other side, you've got Jason Jenkins. This is one of my big takeaways from the depth chart, that he's going to be a full go for this Alabama game. Another Tennessee transfer that dealt with some injuries and dealt with one going in the spring. Just actually insane that he was able to come back and recover fully from that injury. And then you've got Deontay McCray behind him and Mandrell Desir, one of those Desir twins in there. What's your takeaways from this defensive end room, D-Lou? Anything surprising or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest surprise, and not really surprised after the last couple of weeks, but the rise of Jaden Jones up this depth chart. Someone who I think back in the spring we didn't really expect to play a significant role for Florida State in 2025, but he's put in a ton of work. I mean, recovered now from 2 ACL injuries and just been someone that defensive coordinator Tony White has gushed over. And then obviously Jason Jenkins quickly rebounding from this injury, something that we've talked about at length on this show, but the work that he put in throughout the rehab process to put himself in a position to be able to get on the field for Florida State in the preseason was simply incredible. And I mean, the coaching staff, players have all been really impressed by the work ethic and the way that he approaches each day. And I mean, now that he's gotten out there, just like we were talking about Jacob Rizzi, now probably a week, 10 days or so of practice time for Jason Jenkins, and he's already taken over a solo starting spot on Florida State's defense at one of those defensive end positions. Then behind them, Deontay McCray, Mandrell Desir, I mean, someone who we've heard about, and as well as his brother Daryl Desir, who not on this 2D, but someone that you're going to see play for Florida State in 2025, I believe. So, it's going to be a defensive end room to watch. Obviously, I think the biggest thing here is, can James Williams rise up and be that guy for Florida State? Came off the bench at Nebraska, pass rushing specialist, and now he's going to get the chance to go out there and play a boatload of snaps for this Florida State's defense. And if he's able to take those steps that they're expecting, as, like you said, a guy who can not only get after the quarterback, but defend the run as well, be out there first down, second down, third down, in a variety of different situations, I think that's really the difference for this Florida State defense if he takes that step.
Yeah, it's going to be a significant difference for him, what he was doing at Nebraska and what he's going to be asked to do in Tallahassee on this defense with Tony White. But, they really need someone to get back there. And, it's great to see Jason Jenkins getting there. I'm interested to see how much he's going to be of a go, full go. He's still trying to, I would imagine, getting into football shape now. It really just been 2 weeks now where he's a go. This will be another week now to get prepped, but you got to have some guys behind them step up, and I'm really intrigued to see who that might be, and if Jaden Jones is really about that action. That's someone that has been around this program for a long while, but it's just been, he's been dealing with injuries, but he's someone that's shown out, and that's why he's up here on this depth chart. So they need someone, I think, there, and James Williams is really exciting to watch. Go and watch some Nebraska film when he's in there on third downs. He's got a really, really high motor. That's something that lacked immensely. It lacked so much with Pat Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. There was just nothing there. But, someone with a high motor, Pat Payton would show you that maybe sometimes just one down out of 3 downs. Usually, I would expect we'll see an upgrade there on that aspect of things.
And I will say, a little bit surprised, DeMonte Diggs not listed among the 2 deep at Florida State. And then Amari Williams not on here, but I think we're going to see him getting some time on defense as well.
Didn't Diggs have a strong spring?
He was someone that they were bringing up, but, just haven't really heard a ton from him this fall. And I was kind of talking about that last week. It's a little bit concerning that some of those veterans in that defensive line room, whether it's guys that are back at Florida State or guys that came into Florida State with some production and experience at previous programs, we weren't hearing more of. And, I was referring to Diggs, and then obviously, we didn't hear a ton about Darrell Jackson during camp, KJ Sampson, Daniel Lyons, and you look at it now, Diggs and KJ Sampson both not on this 2 deep.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of our biggest concerns is the depth across the whole board on this roster, but specifically on the defensive line. One thing that Tony White has been pressing for this team is showing up, and like I was saying earlier, playing with energy, guys that are holding each other accountable. And I think there's some messages sent early on in this depth chart, as we'll see here later. But I just think some of these guys, it's step up time, and just not to have, yes, maybe you had a good spring, but if you didn't have a good fall camp, you're just going to be dropped down a little bit. Let's go over to the nose tackle position. You were bringing up Darrell Jackson here, someone that we haven't heard a whole ton of during fall camp, but we're hoping that that's just maybe they're doing some kind of thing, just setting it up where Darrell Jackson's going to hopefully be a monster for you to begin the season. But Darrell Jackson's there as your expected starter. And then you've got Daniel Lyons there, someone that was trying to get into football shape just about 2 weeks ago after recovering from an injury there. It was told today that Kevin Wynn will not be playing, will not be available. At least they think that it's nothing severe there and that he'll be able to return from an injury soon. But still, Kevin Wynn was someone that was brought up consistently throughout the fall, showing some really good growth and also trimming down some of his weight. So I think that's a pretty rough loss for you there in the nose tackle position, because like you were just mentioning there, D-Lo, where's KJ Sampson at? And they were hoping to see some strides made from him, and I just don't think that's the case right there. And this is where it becomes very thin, in my opinion, unless they can get Darrell Jackson out there for 98% of those snaps. I just don't feel fully sold behind Darrell Jackson. I just really do not. And yes, you have Daniel Lyons there, but I'm not sold. I'm not sold. He's gonna have to prove it to me. He's gonna have to prove it to me.
And it's kind of crazy to say that, a true freshman being out and Kevin Wynn is a big loss for Florida State, but it really is. This is one of Florida State's highest rated signees in that Tribe 25 class, and was limited a little bit with some injuries in the spring, and obviously trimmed the weight up a little bit this offseason. But it seems like the light really started to turn on for him during fall camp, and he was making a name for himself among that interior defensive line, and he was someone that even veterans were bringing up whenever they were speaking to the media after practice. So it wouldn't surprise me if Kevin Wynn, upon his return, instantly leaps into this 2 deep, and hopefully, for Florida State, they're hoping that can be sooner rather than later, because this is a guy you want to get on the field, get him some game experience, because, like Chroma and like Javon Boggs, Kevin Wynn, I mean, he's a guy that's going to grow throughout the season. The more playing time you give him early, the better he's going to be playing once you get to the latter half of this 2025 campaign.
Yep, that's one that would have killed to hopefully have someone step up. And really, we've been hearing tons about those Desir twins. And the one thing about Tony White's defense, these guys are going to be moving around that line a lot. Like, we're going to see Daryl Jackson off to the outside. You'll see Jenkins on the inside because of his versatility. So it's not specifically that this is going to be defensive end over there type of deal. These guys are going to be put across the board all throughout next Saturday afternoon. So that's something also to keep in mind. Let's jump over to linebacker room, which I'm super excited about. This one, yeah, man, this one's loaded. Some good experience, some guys with, playmaking ability too, which I think has been lacking in the linebacker room for a while outside of going back to like Kalen DeLoach. But let's start off with Justin Cryer, someone that suffered a season-ending injury last year and has fully recovered and has shown to this staff and to Tony White, a new defensive coordinator in town, that he is a starting caliber linebacker at the Power 4 level. And he is here on this depth chart. Right behind him, though, is Blake Nicholson. And then you've got Elijah Herring listed as another starter there. And AJ Cottrell, which was a former walk-on with this team. And then at the jack position, you've got Omar Graham Jr., and then you've got Stephon Thompson right behind him. This room, you feel really good about going into this season. I'll be honest with you, Dustin. This is solid.
You got a lot of talent, a lot of depth, and a lot of experience here with Elijah Herring and obviously Stephon Thompson coming over with what Thompson's able to do at Nebraska and at Syracuse alongside Tony White. And then your returners. I mean, we felt really good about the way Justin Cryer was playing throughout the 2025 season. One of the few maybe bright spots of this Florida State defense was his progression throughout the year before that injury. And then Omar Graham Jr., a guy who really flipped it around from the beginning of 2024, where it almost seemed like he was unplayable out there, to the end of the season, where he found that confidence and started to take really positive steps forward, similar to Cryer. So, I mean, I really love the depth here. Obviously, Blake Nicholson is back. The big one is, when will Florida State get Caleb Lavallee back on the field after that injury he suffered in the spring? He's remained out in the preseason. But regardless, I think you're a true 5 deep here. And then we'll see about AJ Cottrell. You said a former walk-on. He's also still a current walk-on. So that'll be a fun one to see out there. But, a veteran guy who's been playing backup defense and on special teams for Florida State the last couple of seasons, brings a lot of physicality to the field. And he's been fun to watch in practice the last 2 or 3 years while I've been out there. So now seeing him pop on this depth chart, I mean, a very nice surprise. But yeah, I think this linebacker room, the deepest on Florida State's defense, like the tight ends are for the offense. And, man, it should be fun to watch them out there finally having a reliable room of linebackers at Florida State, which is something we haven't been able to say often over the last decade, outside of maybe that 2023 season.
Mm-hmm. I'm always looking for my blitz guys. Who is going to come in like a heat-seeking missile and destroy the backfield of your opponent? And I'm looking on here and I'm trying to see who that might be. I kind of immediately go over to Elijah Herring, if that's going to be the potential guy there.
Yeah.
That seems like one that would stand out to me. But I think there's just so much leadership too in this unit. That's what you would love to have there at your second line on the defense and the second level. Justin Cryer, he showed us that last year, holding guys accountable, being vocal, and also too with his play. But you have Elijah Herring with a lot of playing time as well at the college level. And then Omar Graham Jr. He's been with the ups, the downs, the ups. Personally for him too, he's been on a roller coaster ride of showing strong signs at the beginning, then having that start to the season last year where he got benched and then was able to earn himself back out there on the field as a starter, and actually was one that impressed us there at the end of the season. So really excited for Omar Graham Jr. He also put on some size there at the jack position. Yep. So I like this unit, Delu. I really do.
That's one to note on. I mean, we were wondering who was going to be Florida State starter at jack, which, is a linebacker, but is probably going to line up around the line of scrimmage most of the time, similar to a defensive end. And, that was something that Omar Graham was asked about earlier this preseason, is where he was fitting in. And, he confirmed he's been playing a lot of jack, and that's a position where he's going to be rushing the passer a ton. And said to him, it feels like he's back in high school. So Omar Graham Jr. looking to add some sacks for this Florida State defense in 2025.
I like it. All right, let's jump over to the defensive backfield, which has a lot of things to discuss here. Your starting cornerback, D. Lewis Jabril Rawls.
Nailed it.
Yeah, man. Exactly. Jabril, baby. Charles Lester there behind him, and or Quindarius Jones. We'll discuss that a little bit further here in just a second. And then going over to the other cornerback position, you've got Jerry Wilson, the Houston transfer defensive back, who since arriving in the summer has been an absolute stud for you, not only just in the way that he's come into practice with energy, but also too the takeaways, interceptions. He's been an absolute menace for the first team offense, which is great. Iron sharpens iron type of deal. But Jerry Wilson is your other starting cornerback on the other side. And Shamar Arnu, someone who had a really strong spring, talked highly of this staff and heard a lot of good things too from the inside. He is your backup to Jerry Wilson. What are your thoughts on these two starting cornerbacks here, D-Lou?
This is about how I thought it would shake out a couple of weeks ago. Jerry Wilson, obviously the experience that he brings, playing under Tony White previously, what he's done in 3-3-5 defenses throughout his college career. I mean, that one was basically set in stone. And then outside of that, you had a ton of competition for that other starting job. Obviously, Jabril won out, but Quindarius Jones was pushing there. You see Charles Lester, I mean, actually technically above Quindarius Jones on the depth chart. I know they're backups at that cornerback spot, but it seems like Lester, I mean, has really been pushing going into his second season at Florida State. And then Shamar Arnu, I mean, another member of this true freshman 2025 class who has competed and played his way into having a role on this Florida State defense in 2025. So I think we're quickly seeing this 2025 group that Florida State brought in. It's an impressive looking class of freshmen, and they're going to make an impact throughout the season. But, you don't have a ton of experience at cornerback, but Jabril, he had a really good offseason, put on some good weight between the spring and going into the preseason. And, as these guys, like I think I said it last week, they might start out a little bit slow, but as they gain experience and confidence out there on the field, I think the cornerback position is one that should improve for the Seminoles throughout the season.
Ooh. I mean, if we're going to talk starting unit here, I mean, we got to go over to what, Jerry Wilson is going to be on, and that's Ryan Williams. I mean, that's going to be very, very intriguing to watch. I know we'll do our preview later in the week here on YouTube, but man, that is going to be a fun battle to watch because Ryan Williams is no joke for Alabama, one of the top wide receivers in the country.
Really? Really, that whole, I mean, the top three wide receivers on Alabama's roster are freaks. It's going to be a fun battle just between that whole secondary and Alabama wide receiver room. I mean, that could ultimately decide this game, especially with Alabama's starting running back being out, breaking in a new quarterback. So the defense, they're going to have their hands full, and we'll see if they're able to respond.
Mm-hmm. There's Justin Simpson on here, Facebook, asking Lester as the two, how are we feeling on his progression? I think Dustin just nailed it there just a second ago. As someone that I think here in this latter half of fall camp has really found a groove with Tony White's defense and Coach Surtain as well. Like it's just stride after stride here for him, which is, I think, huge. We've kind of been waiting and seeing if he was going to find that groove, and to find it right here is, I think, a really good sign because he is going to see playing time, and he'll probably be out there this upcoming Saturday as well. You need these guys now. The tough part is, like we were just talking about, you're facing Alabama's wide receiver corps, which are extremely talented. But, he's going to get out there and he's going to learn very quickly. He's going to get some good experience to go off of and go back and look at tape because, I think everybody, we look at game one and everything's all relied on game one, but there's a long season ahead. And just to get some experience for some of these youngsters, which they will see Saturday, is going to be really helpful for them. Let's jump over to the safety room, Dustin. Let's go over to Edwin Joseph being a starter here and or KJ Kirkland. It seems like those two guys are just fighting with each other to see who's going to be out there on the field Saturday. We'll be looking up at the video board to probably see who that ends up being. But I think my eyes are on Edwin Joseph here on that position. And then going over to the other safety position is Ashlyn Barker. And then you got Shyheim Brown listed there. A big discussion across FSU Twitter on him being at the 2 deep. And then at the rover position, you've got Earl Little Jr. right there. No shocker there. He's had a really, really nice start with Tony White since the very beginning of spring when he arrived. And then throughout fall, he went up there to ACC kickoff and represented Florida State there. So no shocker there that he's earned himself a starting spot. And then you've got Donnie Hebert, which has probably been the biggest discussion across social media so far, man. Mr. Donnie, a preferred walk-on there, rocking the number 47. He is in your 2B at your 2 deep behind Earl Little Jr. at the rover. Talk about this one, D-Lou. I mean, this is a little bit of, I wouldn't say crazy surprise. I think Donnie's probably your biggest one potentially, but outside of that, seeing Shyheim Brown there at the 2 deep and Ashlyn Barker beating him out has definitely raised a lot of discussion.
Yeah, I just love to see Donnie in there, man. Not just because that's my dad's name, but it's he's a walk-on. He's been at Florida State going into year 3. Actually, has contributed as a backup on defense, on special teams the last couple of years. Appeared in all 14 games during that ACC championship season for Florida State back in 2023. And then last year saw action in all 12 games. So, despite being a walk-on, he's someone that Florida State hasn't redshirted, and now he's a true junior going into year 3 of Florida State, which is a little bit rare for a guy who isn't a scholarship player. So I think it really shows that he's someone that has put in high effort, impressed the Seminoles during practice, and that's allowed them to give him a role on special teams. And then now, on this 2 deep on defense. And, Tony White has actually mentioned Donnie multiple times back during the spring, a couple times in the preseason after some of these scrimmages. And now, it seems like he could really get a shot out there for Florida State, which would be interesting. And, like you said, Logan, outside of that, I think the surprise is Shyheim Brown, a redshirt senior, a guy who's been here, played a ton of football for Florida State, won that 2022 game against LSU with that block extra point with no time left on the clock. Shyheim Brown, he's made a lot of plays for Florida State, led the team in tackles a season ago, and then now entering his final season of eligibility, a backup on this Florida State defense. So definitely a surprise. But like we've talked about, Tony White, he brings a certain attitude and he has a certain expectation for these guys, regardless if you're a scholarship player or a senior or a walk-on or a true freshman. He demands a lot. And then same thing with Evan Cooper, who's taken over that safety room, and Patrick Surtain, who's putting his input in as well. And I think these other guys, they've risen to the occasion. And you look at a guy like Ashlyn Barker, Edwin Joseph, and KJ Kirkland. One thing you can say about all 3 of those guys when they're on the field is they're given maximum effort. They're playing with a lot of energy out there. And even if they make mistakes, they're trying. And there were some times last year during that 2024 season where, frankly, I questioned Shyheim Brown's effort. And I think the coaching staff, they wanted to see him bring it this offseason. And, it just didn't quite happen compared to what these other guys have done. And then obviously the resurgence we've seen from Earl Little Jr. making that switch over from nickel to safety. And it seems like he's a really good fit for what Tony White wants to do at that rover safety position. So, it's now, like you said about some of the other things on this depth chart, Logan, it's a challenge to these guys, and it's a challenge to Shyheim Brown. Will he respond from this and be able to regain a starting spot at some point during the 2025 season? It's a possibility. But, right now, Florida State, they're really excited with what they have in the rest of the safety room.
Mm-hmm. Very well said there. I think Tony White, he's laid it down of how this defense is going to look. If you're not about the action, you're not going to hold yourself accountable along with also to your teammates. You will not see the field. If you're not going to be out there and show effort, you will not be out there on that field. That's why he's talked about true freshmen coming in. He's talked about them more than about a lot of these other veterans, which is kind of scary. Absolutely. But, let's see how guys want to respond to it. And we'll see if Shyheim Brown, one of those guys that has had a really good, strong start to his career at Florida State, and now has to deal with something like this adversity. Like, can he respond to it? Because you would love to see a guy, because that he has the talents to do it, but he just got to put it together. But I really like at least the way and the message being sent from your new defensive coordinator. That's the official depth chart there, but we're not done. Before we continue, though, we got to jump over
we
to
can't
returnees. We got
skip the long
specialists.
snappers, man.
We got long snapper to talk about here, but we also got returnees. But before we jump into that, though, make sure to, if you have any questions, I already got about 8 questions. We'll do some quick hitters real quick before we end here, but got 8 questions from you guys. If you have any topics or anything, throw them down in the YouTube chat. Also, too, smack that like button. We appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us on this beautiful morning, man. It's game week. It's game week. I'm stoked. I've been ready for a real football game to watch and actually see them out there on the field, and we are getting closer and closer. So I appreciate everybody engaging, throwing some comments in, and liking the video. Means a lot. All right, let's jump over to specialists and returnees. Let's start off with specialists first. Florida State losing Ryan Fitzgerald to the league, get an opportunity there with the Panthers, and then also to now Florida State not having Alex Mastromanno, one of the top punters in the country last year. Now you've got Jake Weinberg and Mac Giamento over there. 6'4", 227. That is a big punter, everybody. He is huge.
Linebacker size.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I even remember being at practices, and Mac, I'm like, good God, that is a huge punter. But that's a big dude. And Jake Weinberg, someone that Mike Norvell, I asked him about specialists and how they were looking, and he did say, in that first scrimmage that didn't go as well that, they want to see from Weinberg. But in that second scrimmage, though, he responded and had a nice showing, and has shown some consistency as something that really had been lacking for him. But that's now a redshirt freshman coming in, being your starting kicker, and then Mac here. Thoughts on them, and then you can jump, of course, into your snapping position as well, your rundown.
No surprises here. I mean, this is how we expected things to work themselves out throughout the offseason. Obviously, Mac and Jake, have some real experience to bring to the table. And Mac, he's been working behind Alex Mastromanno for 3 years, now going into year 4 at Florida State, whereas Jake Weinberg, a really highly regarded high school recruit, got to come into Florida State last year, sit behind Ryan Fitzgerald, watch his process. And I think the biggest thing with him, you just can't teach the leg strength that he brings to the table. And, the accuracy, it seems like it's been a little bit up and down during the preseason. We heard Mike Norvell really challenge Jake Weinberg after that first preseason scrimmage, where it seemed like things just didn't go how Mike Norvell wanted them to go. And, then last week, Mike said that Weinberg came back in that second scrimmage and made 6 or 7 field goals in a row. And it seems like he's gotten back on the right track now, going as you get closer to the start of the season, which is pretty big for Florida State. Then going down to long snapper, you got Mason Arnold back for, going into year 3 at Florida State. Now his second season as a starter for the Seminoles. Peyton Naylor also going into year 3 at FSU. Matt going to be your holder as well. And you got Bruno Reyes, a true freshman, someone who Florida State thinks very highly of as your backup kicker and punter and holder. So, that'll be one to watch throughout his career at FSU. And another guy that has very talented and accurate leg. And, as you can see here on the depth chart, they truly believe that he can contribute at both kicker and punter if necessary.
Now over to the other side, one that I was really intrigued on is seeing who is going to be your kick returners and also 2 punt returners. So Samuel Singleton, someone who had a lot of success last year, also won an award.
All-American.
For how he performed. Really impressive there at the kick returning position. And also, too, you have Jalen Lucas, who's really intriguing as well. Didn't get to see a whole ton of him last year because of that injury, but Jalen Lucas back there as well. Mekhi Danzy, thank you, God. Let's go. I was pulling for Mekhi Danzy to get in here. We'll see what he looks like in this rotation, but your starting unit is Samuel Singleton Jr. and Jalen Lucas. But Mekhi Danzy, man, if you're talking about just let him get a couple strides, man, that is all ACC speed. Right there, dangerous speed. But I love that combo there. And you also got Roydell Williams there, and then you got Gavin Sawchuk there. They love putting running backs there at the kick return position. And then at punt return, you have Jalen Lucas. I don't think there's too much of a shock there. And you also have Squirrel White. We had been hearing about Squirrel White being there at punt return, as we know too, having that experience previously at Tennessee. But what's your takeaways from this group here? No tons of shock, but a lot of speed, I would say.
It makes me nervous. That's what I'm going to say. Jalen Lucas coming off a season-ending injury. Roy Dell, missed the majority of that 2024 campaign with an injury that he suffered in practice. And then Squirrel White, obviously, banged up last year at Tennessee, and that's kind of continued during multiple phases of the offseason for Florida State, whether that was back in spring camp or now into the preseason where Mike Norvell expects him to be available, but still he got dinged up pretty recently in fall camp. And, those guys being your returners and having a chance for a lot of collisions outside of their work that they're already doing on offense kind of worries me a little bit. I do love Samuel Singleton at kick return. I mean, obviously what he did last year was pretty impressive. All-American, had that touchdown against Duke. I want to see Mekhi Danzy out there with what he brings to the table. I mean, Olympic level speed, set the ACC record for the 400 meters. So if he gets moving, you're probably not stopping him. And then I think Gavin Sawchuk, he brings a lot of athleticism to the table. But again, I just look at Jalen Lucas and Roy Dell and Squirrel and what they've been through, and that worries me a little bit. And I do wonder, there's some other guys that Florida State could rely on here. We saw BJ Gibson last year get some time at punt returner. We've heard some things from Coach JP that Deuce Robinson was getting a look back there at punt return, which is pretty crazy to say for a 6'6" guy. But then again, FSU wasn't afraid to put the ball in Keon Coleman's hands back in 2023, a first-time 6'4" punt returner. So they're willing to do some unorthodox things back there. And, I do think they'll be smart about protecting these guys like Lucas, Roydell, and White, who are going to be so crucial to your offense's success.
As long as we're not putting Deuce out there, I'll feel all right. I'll feel pretty fine. But yeah, I mean, with all the injuries that Squirrel White has been going throughout his career and since his arrival in Tallahassee, let's just try to be as careful as possible there, definitely with how thin you are at wide receiver. All right, let's jump over to some questions to finish off this show, D-Lou. We got about 9 of them here, and we'll run through them quickly. Let's start off here right off the bat, man, from New to Business, asking, who do you guys think would be the most standout player for offense and defense for Florida State this upcoming season? That's what everybody's kind of wondering going into every football season. Who will it be? Who could it be? Who is it going to be? If I'm going to go, I'll start off with offense, D-Lou, and then if you want to give one on the defensive side of the ball, or you can give offense, I won't hold you back. Offensively, I'm going to go Randy Pittman. I think that might be. I think that now it just depends on how you're describing or the description of a standout player would be, but this is a newcomer to Florida State's roster. I think it's someone that, maybe is not going to be talked about a whole ton over guys like Deuce, Squirrel, or even now Usman Croma coming in. But I think Randy Pittman is going to be a major standout for you in this Florida State offense.
I agree. You want me to go offense or defense?
If you want to give an offense one, go right ahead. Absolutely.
I'm going to go with Tommy. Obviously he's got to be your best player if Florida State is going to get to where they want to be in 2025. And we heard Mike Norvell, just about 2 hours ago, say that he believes that Tommy Castellanos is playing as good as he's ever played during his career. Hasn't turned the ball over a ton during camp. He's been a seamless fit for this offense that Gus Malzahn runs, which, makes sense considering they've, worked together in the past at UCF. And so far this transition from Boston College to Florida State has pretty much been what we thought it would be. Tommy Castellanos, he played out of position last year, if that's what you want to call it, with what he was doing with under Bill O'Brien. Whereas Florida State, they've really tailored this offense to fit around what Tommy does well. And I think they're going to put him in the right positions, the right spots to have success. And if he does what he's been doing in the preseason, it should be a very good bounce back season for Tommy Castellanos, not only with what he did with his arm, improving his efficiency last season, but I think his legs are now going to be back to being a major weapon for the Seminoles as long as he's healthy.
Mm-hmm. And then jumping over to defense real quick, I'm going to go with Jerry Wilson. Mr. Jerry, talked about him earlier on this depth chart, but I think so highly of this guy. And not only is he going to put himself in the right areas, but also to bring in energy and juice. And I think that's so needed on the defensive side of the ball. But I got Jerry there on that. And I'd love to, jump into a defensive lineman because I think that's absolutely crucial for this team. But I just don't feel confident yet in some of those guys until they show it to me and prove it to me. But Jerry Wilson is one that's going to be a standout player for you on the defense.
I don't have much to add. I'm not trying to copy you. I was thinking about James Williams, but it's hard to bet against Jerry Wilson, with the experience that he has in the 3-3-5 defense, playing under Tony White previously, the production that he's put up as a cover corner and what he was able to do last season at Houston. I think he's going to be a very formidable and consistent piece on this Florida State defense and essentially lock down one side of the field.
Real quick, we kind of mentioned this earlier on the depth chart, but what happened to Caleb Labale, the UNC transfer linebacker D-Lou, but he injured his foot. That was in the spring, correct? And this has been a long-lasting injury and recovery, but is getting closer and closer. John Papuchis, now Florida State's linebackers coach, mentioned, they're trying to get him back fully into the get him back fully recovered, then hopefully get him acclimated and still get down this defense, since he hasn't had a ton of time on the field at all, really, to get it down for Tony White. So it's going to take a little while, but I think it's something that you'd see him become fully available for you, later and the back end of September.
Yep, it's been real tough for him. I mean, he was on the scooter for a little bit and it looked like a cast on the foot, and hasn't really done anything this preseason. So, I mean, you're hoping, he can get back on the field at some point, because Florida State, I mean, they really like what he can bring to that room.
This has been probably the hottest topic I've seen across our chat today, and this is about Cam Davis. Where is Cam Davis? What's going on with Cam Davis? Why isn't he here on the depth chart? And we dove a little bit into it earlier. Cam Davis, the biggest thing for him was, maybe trimming up a little bit, but also too, I think it's more of whenever he's out there, understanding where he needs to be, taking on which gap, and, just understanding and getting down the system for the most part. But also too, you did bring in more guys into the running back room with Gavin Sawchuk, and too, you made a big time push and put a lot of resources behind getting Usman Kroma away from the Georgia Bulldogs. I think they kind of felt, they did not feel too fully encouraged where Cam Davis was developing. And this is where he's at. And, I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's going to be more of, can you show it to you when he gets out there on the field? Luckily, in week 2 and 3, those are great games for you to do that. But right now in practices, it's just not the case.
Yeah, and I think last year, vision was a little bit of a problem for Cam Davis, finding the right holes. Catching the ball out of the backfield was a little bit of an issue at times, inconsistent hands. And, like I said earlier in the show, he just doesn't have a ton of experience playing at that running back position. I mean, he's a natural athlete, but he worked a ton at quarterback during his prep career, and he's working on that transition. I think it's taken a little bit longer than Florida State wanted. And when you've got so many guys who have this college experience already in this backfield, I mean, they're going to rely on those guys. And then someone like Kroma, I mean, he's just immensely talented, and you don't really see a true freshman arrive for the fall and not be here for the spring and go up a depth chart, I mean, this quickly, when you think about the guys that Florida State has in that room. I mean, it really just speaks to the caliber of player that Kroma is. And I think Florida State fans and other teams, they're going to find out about that soon.
Mm-hmm. This is from Willie asking, which position gives you the most pause for thought going into this upcoming season? Immediately to me is defensive line, and who is going to be someone, and who's going to step up behind Daryl Jackson. But I also need Daryl Jackson to step up. So that's where, I mean, that's so easy of a pick there for me, and probably some other FSU fans, probably for you too, D-Lou. That's one that I'm like, whew. I mean, it's like who's it going to be? Who is going to be a playmaker there on the defensive line? And you're already a little bit thin there, and had to rely on Kevin Wynn, who's not going to be available for this game as a true freshman, your top guy in your recruiting class. But that's one that makes me pause right away and think, man, it's a room that's thin and just didn't get enough juice that I wanted to hear from the fall. And like I said, we're just hearing things, not there at the practices and such. And Daryl Jackson could be absolutely wrecking Luke Petitbon and some of those guards on the inside, which I personally that would be great to hear. But not fully, though. I don't want my offense line to get ripped to shreds. But you still need an absolute animal there, because and you also need Daryl Jackson to stay healthy. But I'm going to go with defensive line here.
Yeah, not only a defensive line, but I mean, there are some definite concerns regarding the offensive line. Both your starting tackles missed the spring. Richie Leonard missed the majority of that 2024 season. obviously you just got Jacob Rizzi back into the fold. Injuries have been a question mark for this Florida State offensive line. And, even though they have so much experience at the top of that lineup, it's like, are your starting 5 or even your starting 6, are they going to be able to make it through a 12-game regular season, considering the previous history? And then also the missed practice time this offseason in the spring, how much does that affect things going on early in the season when you haven't had a ton of time this preseason to build chemistry, to get on the same page with one another? And that's such an important thing when you're talking about the offensive line position. I mean, all 5 guys, they've got to be dialed in on the right job. And, one guy going the wrong direction or taking the wrong step could be the difference between a loss and a touchdown. So that's something to watch. And I'm also pretty concerned about Florida State's wide receivers. I mean, you've got your proven guys in Deuce and Squirrel, but Squirrel's been banged up, and it's been banged up since last season. Other guys have been banged up. We didn't mention Dwayne McCoy, but he's going to miss the Alabama game as well due to an injury. Hasn't done much for Florida State this preseason. Gavin Blackwell arriving from North Carolina. He was hurt for a lot of the first portion of fall camp and recently got back out there. And then the other guys behind that just aren't experienced, haven't produced. I think the guys returning to Florida State's roster, Dwayne McCoy has the most production. It's like 70 yards or so. So you're really counting on guys and banking on them to step up, and they have to if Florida State's going to have a successful season there. But the lack of production, the injury concerns going into it, I mean, things could go wrong. I mean, there's a scenario where that happens.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Willie asking, are you guys more confident in the offense or the defense? And this has been a discussion we've been talking about highly throughout the offseason. I feel like it's gone in waves a little bit. I'm like, ooh, I feel really good about this defense. And okay, offense, making some splash plays and such and everything. I'm still sticking. It's becoming a tougher and tougher question. So good job, Willie, on this one. But it's getting tougher as the days go on. I'm still leaning defense.
Yep, me too.
I'm down here in Tampa. I'm near Orlando a little bit. I got a lot of UCF alums. I got a lot of people here on the Tampa beat covering the Bucks that cover UCF, and they weren't too fully sold on Gus Malzahn and what went down there for the Knights. I'm not fully sold yet on offense. Now, do I think they improved a lot just personnel-wise from last year? Yes, I do. You're bringing in guys with some production, and I think Thomas Castellanos is great because he is going to give you some leverage and some playmaking ability better than what you had with DJU. But I'm just not still fully sold there. I'm relying on the defensive coordinator here with Tony White, and I liked how he's been holding guys accountable. I'm not saying that Gus Malzahn has not been doing that. Right now, I feel more comfortable and confident right now on the defensive side of the ball, D-Lou. How about you?
I agree. I think, Tony White coming in and just what he's proven over the last 4 years or so, you have to be really confident that he can get this defense going back in the right direction and pretty quickly. I mean, a top 25 defense in the last 4 years, but that also came at 2 different schools, at Syracuse and at Nebraska. And I'd be willing, if you pulled up his depth chart that he had at Syracuse from his first year there, and you pulled up his depth chart from his first year at Nebraska, probably not as much talent, even though this isn't, as talented as a Florida State defense as it's been in years past. He's probably got more talent he's working with at Florida State than what he dealt with at the past 2 schools that he's worked at. And he was very productive there. I mean, again, scoring defense, rushing defense. He's had some times where his defenses have been taken advantage of a little bit in the passing game. And, that is something to watch since Florida State, they don't have a ton of experience back there. And, obviously relying now on 3 new starting safeties, a new starting quarterback, cornerback. Thankfully, you have Jerry Wilson back there to lock down one side. But I would roll with the defense, I think, just because of Tony White's pedigree.
Next question here. We've already talked about that first part of here from Pixel asking Barker over Brown. Kind of surprised by that one. But what's going on with Landon Thomas? And he dealt with an injury throughout fall that's kind of limited him quite a bit of getting out there on the field. But Mike Norvell did say, I believe it was last week, I want to say he did say that Landon made a few big plays for them on the offensive side of the ball. So that's a really good sign. But I think that's probably why he is there in the 2 deep. And I mean, too, you brought in Randy Pittman. as well. And Amari Williams is a really good pass catcher too. Those two guys I think are like competing for your best pass catchers. And they moved Chase Lofton over from tight end over to wide receiver, at least for this game 1 against Alabama. So that's kind of the rundown there for Landon Thomas.
He's
Let's
just
jump over.
been
Go
he's
ahead.
just been dinged up. Yeah, I think he's been hurt a little bit more than Florida State wanted the last 2 off seasons, and we heard about him breaking his collarbone in the off season leading up to that 2024 campaign, and makes sense now when you look back on it. He was a little limited during fall camp and in the preseason, and then obviously came on as 2024 progressed, and then same thing, got dinged up at some point in summer workouts, and that caused him to miss some portions of fall camp. But like Logan said, back out there, making some plays, and he'll be on the field for FSU.
This is a question from Tommy saying, I believe I missed you guys talking about the offense. Is Boggs as good as I'm hearing at wide receiver? D-Lou, you've been high on this kid since the recruiting part of things, and you were really excited about this addition, so I'll give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an under the radar diamond for Florida State. You don't really find guys like this who produce at such a high level at the prep level, at the high school level. Javon Boggs, a lot of guys that you bring in as recruits, you're kind of banking on potential and what they can develop into. But Javon Boggs has already showed you who he is with, roughly 5,000 receiving yards in his prep career, 50 touchdowns. Like we talked about, a consistent winner in high school where he helped Coco to 3 consecutive state championships. And maybe not an elite athlete, but I think the football IQ, the route running, and I mean, he's just got a knack to get open and make plays. He's just one of those guys that has that it factor. I mean, you get the ball in his hands and he can make a play, and it's going to be really fun to watch this kid out there, not only in game 1, but I think throughout his career at Florida State, he's going to be one that fans are probably going to fall in love with.
Mm-hmm. Got some true freshmen that the staff loves. Got to add Usman Cromah in there at the running back room. Guys setting the bar of how it should be when you arrive as a true freshman in Tallahassee, which is great. We'll finish it off here with Nuna asking, are you guys going to be at the game commentating like you usually do? We don't usually commentate, but that would be a fun gig to do. Dealer, could you imagine being up there in the booth? I don't know if I'd have to mute my mic a few times if it was anything like last year. But talking about the highs and lows of the game, awesome work. Appreciate the kind comment there. So we will be there on hand covering the game for you guys. We got tons of content coming to NoleGameday.com, including our YouTube channel. We will go live instantly after the game once we get done talking with Mike Norvell and a select few of players. So we'll be there to give you guys an instant reaction. Then we'll have tons of content all throughout the season of pop-up shows like this, breaking news, or any kind of significant stories. We'll hop on here and give it to you the best that we can. But also, too, keep an eye out. We might be doing some watch parties during some games this year. And if you guys like that or enjoy that, make sure you subscribe down below. It will notify you when we do go live for those. So that's our wrap up there from Florida State's first official depth chart being released. We'll be back live on Wednesday for you guys to do a full preview between Florida State and Alabama. The kickoff is at 3:30 on ABC. We're getting close, D-Lou. We're getting close, and it feels really good, and it's going to be nice to kind of just move on, take over, and turn that page from the 2024 season and see what this Seminole team has to give. If you're still with us on YouTube, appreciate a lot of y'all. Almost got close to 200 live on here. Really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button down below if you enjoyed it. Also, too, like I was saying earlier, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell next to it, so then you do get notified to your phone directly when we have breaking news or anything coming out, injury updates, depth charts, stuff like this, or just kind of like our game previews or instant reactions. It will be alerted right to you on your phone. So appreciate it. Y'all enjoy the rest of y'all's week. Safe travels over to Tallahassee, and we'll talk to you guys on Wednesday for FSU versus Alabama, our official preview. Peace.